Welcome back. This is part 2 of the Practical Ethical Hacking 15 Hours. If you've made it through part 1, congratulations. No introduction, no nothing needed here. We're going to just jump right in from where we left off in part 1.
The next several videos are going to talk about web information gathering. So this is going to be important because a lot of the times we're going to be tasked with a web penetration test, or we might encounter a website on an external or internal penetration test. And being able to gather information and perform enumeration on those websites is super important. So what I'm going to show you throughout is how to gather some of the information passively that is out there. And then we'll talk about active methods that actually involve going out to the website and gathering information that way as well. So the first and most important thing, especially when it comes to websites or bug bounty hunting, etc., is that we need to identify what subdomains are out there. And you saw earlier when we were looking at Tesla, it had a scope of something like *tesla.com. This asterisk is a wildcard. This means that anything and everything is open to us in the scope, except it was out of scope in the subdomain range. Now, we can utilize tools to our advantage to discover these subdomains. Why are subdomains important? Well, we might run into something that is like dev.tesla.com. Or we might run into a website that should have never been out there, right? Like the dev or like testsite.tesla.com, for example. Or we might find login forms. Another reason that it's so important is because if you just look at tesla.com, you're limiting yourself to one website where there could be potentially tons of websites on these subdomains. So we really need to hunt these and be certain that we're incorporating everything that we can when we're doing our assessments. So one great tool that I want to point out is a tool called Sublister. Now we need to install that. So let's type in apt install Sublister like this. Okay, and this will just take a second to get it all set up, and we will utilize this tool to get these subdomains. Okay, now that it's set up, all we have to do is type in Sublister, hit tab for autocomplete, hit enter, and it gives you the syntax. We can do a --h for help or -h for help, and all we really need here is a domain. So we could say -d for tesla.com, and it's going to start searching for tesla.com, and don't worry about this error if you get the error. So it's looking through all these different search engines, similar to what the Harvester was doing. But you're going to see that it's going to return quite a bit more. So we see Baidu, Yahoo, Google. It's going to go through all these and try to search. Now, while this is going on, I want to point out another way to do this. So let's go out to the web, and let's go and load up another site called crt.sh. So we say crt.sh like this. It'll load up a website like so. Let me make this a little bigger for you. And we can do the wildcard ourselves. So you see the percentage is a wildcard. So we're just going to say %.tesla.com. Now what we're doing is we're using certificate fingerprinting. Now we're going to go out and look for certificates that have been registered, and it's going to attempt to find those and tell us what's out there. So you can see that we can find energysupport.tesla.com, gridlogic.energy.tesla.com, and we would scroll through these and try to identify all the different ones. Like SSO, single sign-on, that might be interesting. If I could find anything in here that's like vpn.tesla.com or dev.tesla.com, any sort of thing like that, I'm also interested in it. API toolbox could very well be interesting. sso-dev.tesla.com. So these are the sort of things that we're after. And you see right now that we have different levels to domains. Like here you see that we have our subdomain, but what about a subdomain, like a fourth level of a domain? You see gridlogic.energy.tesla.com. So we can go deeper and deeper when it comes to these domains. And what Sublister is going to be doing right now is it's going to try to find just the subdomain. So it's going to look for third levels. It would not discover this gridlogic.energy.tesla.com without a little bit of finagling and looking through the help to figure out how to do that. So we can come to a site like crt.sh to see if we could find any additional subdomains within this, and we can utilize tools like Sublister as well. So I'm going to let this finish, but in the next video, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to improve upon this process with some tools that have been written in Go that I think are fantastic. So I'm going to let this run. We're going to have part 2 of this video where we actually review the results, and then we'll go from there. So I will see you over in the next video. Okay, so we have our results back. In part 1, we went pretty quick. Part 2, I want to talk about the results, what might be interesting here, and then identify some other tools that you can download and use and go play with on your own. So this has identified quite a few things. I mean, there's a big list here, 87 subdomains. And I lied to you when I said that it didn't get fourth levels. I thought there used to be a recursive feature where you'd have to do a -R to get those. Now you don't have to do that. It just picks up fourth levels for you. Now, Sublister is great at finding some of these things. Like if we come through here, there is a dev.tesla.com. And I saw down towards the end that there was some staging 2 here, a dev here, a test. These all look juicy. SSO-dev looks juicy. I might be after something like QA as well, or something like vpn.tesla.com. I want to know where your mail is at. So here's webmail, Xmail, anything here. You could also look through these lists and possibly identify what kind of tools they're using. You might see something like link.tesla.com or zoom.tesla.com. And this really just kind of drives home what they're running on their back end for a lot of things. Now, this isn't the all-inclusive. Sublister is a great tool. Sublister was ahead of its time when it came out, but there are better tools out there. There are tools that incorporate pretty much everything in one go. So you might have cert.sh like this, you might have Sublister included, and the one tool that is really popular, if you go out to Google, type in OWASP AMAS, and this is the go-to tool for a lot of people doing bug bounty hunting. So if we click on the AMAS project here in GitHub, you can download the project and install it per the installation instructions here. So you have an installation guide down in the documentation. The reason I have chosen not to show it in this series is because actually running AMAS takes a long time. But you can configure AMAS to do a lot of things and find a lot more subdomains. So my challenge to you is to get AMAS installed, and on top of that, see how many more subdomains than 87 can you find when you actually run it. So another last thing to point out is if you want to use Sublister and you used it, it was really, really slow, it's always helpful to check the -H on the help. And you can see in here that there is a -T for threads. Always check the help. So we can specify a domain like we did before, do something like -D of tesla.com, and then you can specify threads of like 100 as opposed to maybe 1 thread or 10 threads that was running originally. We give it 100 threads, it's going to go a lot faster. We're going to get a lot more results. You could also do a -V for verbosity here and get your results in real time if you're impatient or you're trying to go out to the web. So there are great tools out there for doing subdomain hunting. And again, subdomain hunting is very, very critical because if we just limited ourselves to tesla.com, look at all the things that we would miss. So we can find out a lot here. Now, not all of these pages are going to be alive also. There's a good possibility that we can go to something like this mfa.dev or -dev.tesla.com and then it won't work. We can give it a go and see. Like, not always do these work. These are what show up in search engines, but it's worth knowing about them. And there are other tools out there, such as like, go to Google, such as Tom Nom Nom's HTTP probe, like this. Tools like that out there that will probe a list that you give it. You can give it this list into the probe. It'll say, hey, this website's alive, or this website's not alive. And then you can start narrowing down these lists as well. So that is something to think about when you get your wheels spinning. But for now, for information gathering and for the scope of this course, we don't have to worry about it too much. But I do want to point out some other alternatives and ways to do subdomain hunting, and then what to look for in subdomain hunting. So that is it for this video. I'm going to catch you over in the next one. Now the next few videos have to deal with web apps as well, but instead of looking at subdomains, we're going to look at what a website is built with. And that's a good indicator here of built with. So let's go out to Google and we're going to just search built with, and we're going to go right to builtwith.com. And let's take a look at what this does. So let's just search tesla.com, for example. We'll do a lookup, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can read it. And what this does is this goes out and it looks at what type of tech Tesla's running. Now it gives all this stuff that it can see: Google Analytics, Salesforce. That's great, but it also tells us the widgets that are running. You can see it is part of Bugcrowd, LogMeIn, Twitter. Okay, it's got these language things here, but what we're really after is what kind of frameworks it might be running on. So it says here that it's running on PHP. It has Adobe Enterprise Cloud. Okay, that's interesting. It's got CDN, the Content Delivery Network. Interesting. It utilizes Stripe. Okay, we can scroll through this. Looks like it might be written in Drupal. That's an indicator there. And this is a big website, so it's got a lot. Look at all the information here. And it might be a lot to track down. So with this, with a big website like this, there's a better way, I think. Now, Built With is a great resource, but I think there's some other stuff out there that might help us a little bit better. So let's go out to Google as well, and let's search for a tool called Wapalyzer, just like this, and we're going to use it for Firefox. So it should pull this up here, and we'll click on the first one and go ahead and just select Add to Firefox. Select Add, and now it will appear. So now we have Wapalyzer. Let's go back to Tesla. And you see this little guy here in the corner. We're going to click on this. We're going to accept it. And now we get a little bit of information as to what's going on. Not as much information as Built With, but I actually like Wapalyzer a lot more because it kind of just gives you an indication right away with what's going on. Now, Wapalyzer is more of an active type of reconnaissance. I only say that, and I don't necessarily believe it, but it's because we do have to interact with the website. Now, we're not doing any type of scanning. We're just going out to the website like a normal user would. And to me, it's still kind of passive because we're not doing anything that would be out of the norm. So here we can see the content management system is running on Drupal. We can see the programming language is running PHP. Those are both identified with Built With as well. Now, why is this important, you're telling me? Well, it's important because if we know that it's running with PHP or Drupal, there might be a vulnerability within those. And a lot of times when we have this, let's see if we go to this website, you can see PHP is running, we get a lot of things, and we get version numbers. So look at the Wapalyzer website. You see that it's running on an operating system of Ubuntu. It's got a programming language of PHP. The web server is Nginx with 1.14.0 version number. Okay, it can tell that it's running on Amazon Web Services as a platform. It's got all kinds of information here. It's got the payment processing. It's running Google Analytics. So see the type of information that can come through. A lot of times you'll see things like jQuery and other type of libraries here, and the version numbers as well. Now you take those version numbers and you do enumeration on them, and you try to find any type of vulnerabilities that might happen there, And the more information that we can gather on a client, on a website, whatever it is, the better off we are. So when we're gathering information on Tesla, okay, now we know the content management system is written in Drupal, the programming language PHP. Is that going to lead to an exploit? Maybe, but you don't know where it's going to come up in the future. So this type of information gathering is great. Now, one more thing that we can use. We've got something built into our machine. Let's go out to the terminal and we can take a look at it. So we've got a tool called WhatWeb, just like this, and hit enter on it. And if we look at the syntax, all we need is to specify a target. So we enter the URL, host name, IP address, or Nmap format. So we just say WhatWeb URL. So let's give it a go. We'll say WhatWeb, and we'll just say https tesla.com. And it is a redirect, so it might not pull down everything for us here. So it did pull down an IP address. It gave us a redirect. I don't know if there is a follow redirection option here. But what we'll do is we will just say something instead. We'll say like tesla.com instead of 443 and see if that does anything different. And it didn't. So it does give us some information in here. It's not as pretty of a layout, but it is a tool that is built into Kali Linux for us. So look, we can pull down Drupal 8. We didn't know what kind of Drupal it was running on. Now we know it's Drupal 8. We see that it's running PHP 7.3.7. That's identification too that we didn't have previously. So using more tools to our advantage gives us more information. And we can pull down the headers that it has here, and you see they have different types of headers, which we're not going to get into this quite yet. When we get into the web app portion of this, we'll talk more about headers. But this is just yet another thing that we need to look at, and we pull down the IP address as well. So a little bit more information that we can gather here and just keep going from this. So that is it. Utilize the resources around you to gather information. We could utilize resources that go out and scan a specific web page like this. We can go and utilize a resource such as Wapalyzer that you just visit the web page and you can see what's running on there, or a website like builtwith.com where we just don't even navigate to the website. We just type it in and it does all the work for us. And we can pull down all this information, which is by far the most information out of these three tools. So utilize all the resources available to you, and you will have much advantages when it comes to pen testing and your enumeration skills. So that's it for this video. I'll catch you over in the next one. Another useful tool when it comes to web applications is a tool called Burp Suite. Now, let's go ahead and open up Burp Suite. So we're going to go up to the applications, and in your favorite should exist Burp Suite here. Now, Burp Suite is what we call a web proxy. Now, a web proxy means that it has the capability of intercepting traffic for us, and we're going to see what that looks like. So you're probably going to get this error about this JRE. Don't worry about it. We're just going to say okay. You might get you need to accept this license agreement when you first start. Go ahead and accept that as well. And if you see an update screen, go ahead and just close. So we are on the community edition, so we will have limited features. We'll talk more about those when we get to the web application section, but I just want to introduce you to what Burp Suite can do in a very basic form and how we can actually gather some information out of a website from Burp Suite pretty easily. So let's go ahead and just select temporary project and click next, and then select start burp. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our Firefox for utilizing Burp Suite. So go ahead and go to favorites in Firefox. And I want you to go over to the right hand little hamburger here, and you're going to go and select preferences. From preferences, we're going to scroll down all the way to the bottom, and we're going to select settings. Now we're going to select this manual proxy configuration here, and we're going to say 127.0.0.1 on port 8080. Later, when we get to the web application section, I'll show you a much easier way of doing this with a tool called Foxy Proxy. But for right now, this is a very high level overview. So go ahead and use this proxy server for all protocols, and that should fill in the rest down here. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to leave this open. I'll show you why in a second. So I also want you to go to a new tab, and I want you to go to https://burp, like this. Now, your first page might not show up like this. It might show up with a "you need to accept this certificate." You're just going to say allow down at the bottom and say yes, permanently store this exception. And then you'll be brought to a screen somewhat like this. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and just click on CA certificate here and then save the file. Mine is already saved, as you can see in my downloads right here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go back into preferences once we have that saved. And we're going to go to privacy and security over on the left-hand side. We're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there is a view certificates button down here. And then we're going to go ahead and just hit import. Your downloads folder should automatically be selected. If not, select downloads and then just select the cacert.der, hit open, and then it's already installed for me, but you will have two checkboxes. Check both of those boxes and select OK, and then it should now be imported for you. So a couple things to note: Firefox sometimes changes things around. I am recording this video in 2019. If you watch it at a later time, just be cognizant that in the General tab, usually towards the bottom is the network settings, and the privacy and security settings usually contain the certificates. So look around for those. Sometimes these move. So from here, let's go ahead and just see what we set up. So I want you to go ahead and try to go to a website. We can try to say tesla.com, and it is going to stall out. What is going on here? So if we go over here, we see this proxy tab is lit up in orange. We're going to go ahead and click on that. And you can see that it's gathering some data here. It's captured some stuff from Firefox. We've got more Firefox. We can just click forward through this if we want. And now we can see Tesla starting to load. And what we're doing is we're intercepting requests that Tesla is making out. This to me looks like a API request or a GeoIP request. So this might be geolocation, looking for a city. So we're just clicking through. All we're doing is capturing all different kinds of traffic, and we can modify this traffic. Say we have this request here. You don't have to know what this is right now, but we've got this GET request. We can make this a POST request and forward that and see what happens. I'm just going to turn the intercept off. I'm going to show you what's going on here. So we can go over to the target, and you can see all the pages that have loaded in here. This is all the traffic that has been intercepted so far since we ran Tesla. So not only is Tesla running, but you can see that it pulls Google Analytics, it pulls this secured visit, which looks like tracking as well. It pulls DoubleClick, which looks like maybe ads, and then it has an API running here as well. So it's gathering all this traffic through, but we're going to dig into just Tesla here. And I just want to click on the first / and see if there's a response to our request. There isn't. Let's go ahead and just look at maybe let's see if we click into one of these, if we get a good response. We don't. Let's refresh one more time on the page, and you might even need to hit enter. Okay, and sometimes it doesn't come through right away, so let's go ahead and just click around. There we go. Do you see all the stuff coming through now? That's more like it. It wasn't picking everything up right away. So what we can do is we can look at some of the things that just came through. Like we just went to the Model 3 page. So let's go ahead and click on this Model 3 and see what it's got for us. So you can see that if we look at the request for this get Model 3, we made a get request to Model 3. And what's happened is we say, hey, I want to go out to this page, go ahead and take me there. And then we can view the response as well. Now in the response, we can get so much information. Look at this. We're seeing here that PHP 7.3.7 is running on the back end. We can see a bunch of information here as well, like Drupal 8 is running. We identified that earlier, but we're identifying it again. We could see a lot of other stuff. There's weird things here going on too, like there's a server name sitting in here. Typically on an assessment, this would actually be a finding, a low finding, but it's informational, as this is giving us information on possibly naming structure inside the network. but they also have their own Tesla type header here. So this is very unique for a client. But what the point of the matter is here is that we can intercept a basic request and response and get a lot of information through Burp Suite. We're going to hit home on this really hard when it comes into the scanning and enumeration section and when we get into the web section as well. But for now, I just want you to take away that we've installed Burp Suite and we can go out to a website, and I still define this as not active scanning. There is a feature in Burp Suite that has active scanning that we could actually run, but that is a Burp Suite Pro. So it has a vulnerability scanner built in. You can see up here, upgrade to Burp Suite Professional, automatically find vulnerabilities. I have Burp Suite Pro. It's $400 a year. It is absolutely fantastic, worth the money. One of the few applications that I would recommend anybody buy. But for the course, I'm going to limit it to utilizing Community Edition. I will bring in Pro sometimes just to show you some features, but we're not going to worry about that. So long spiel short, I still feel that we are in step 1 here, even though we are accessing the website. We're not doing anything very actively with scanning. This is all very passive. We're using traffic like a normal user would. So you can see that we can intercept traffic and get a lot of information. Again, tools like Wappalyzer, look, it pulls down the headers for us and it says, hey, it's running PHP 7.3.7. It's running Drupal 8. Where is it getting that from? Well, it's getting it from these responses. So it's pulling a lot of that down for us automatically, but there's a lot of things that we can do when we get into Burp Suite as well. So consider this just a mini introduction into the tool, and then we'll touch back on it over and over again as we go. So this is it for this video. We're going to get into some Google Foo in the next video and talk about social media as well. So I'll see you in the next one. Okay, now on to what is going to be your absolute best friend in your entire life and in your career. Google. Google, everybody. I cannot stress how important it is to be good at Googling. And you don't have to be amazing at it, but there are so many things that people approach me with that you can find on Google in a second. And if you've never seen the Let Me Google That For You, that's a lot of my life when it comes to the questions I get asked. And what makes a really good pen tester or a really good anything, especially in IT, is the ability to Google. So being able to look this stuff up on your own and being able to find your own resources and find solutions to your problems are going to make you a way better pen tester and just way better at your career with troubleshooting and everything else. So I'm done harping. I just wanted to stress how important I think Google is. So I'm going to show you today what's called a little bit of Google Foo. So I'm already out on the interwebs. I'm out to Google, and here we've got Google up, but I want to show you that I just searched for Google search syntax, and the first one, Google search operators, came up. If you go look at this page, this is a really nice list of some things that you can run on Google and will help you out. I'm going to show you just a few things that we can use to search for and how we can start narrowing down some results. So if we go to Google and we just type in something like Tesla, that's going to bring up Tesla here. Okay, we found the main Tesla site, but we're going to get news articles and we're going to get all kinds of stuff. Okay, we get the Twitter, and maybe we want this. Maybe we do, but maybe we don't. Maybe we don't want all this mess. Maybe we only want items from Tesla. So we could just say something like site tesla.com, which we've discovered here. And notice I'm not putting in the www because that would limit us to that specific domain. So we have the wwws in here, but you could see that it's starting to pull in something like shop and other items, right? So we can search for tesla.com, and maybe we don't want tesla.com www. Maybe we take out, with this subtract here, maybe we just take out www. And we're going from 600, almost 700,000 results to 131,000 results. And you can see now we're pulling in IR, we're pulling in forms, and we're pulling in shop. And we're getting all these different unique subdomains. So I've showed you sublister, and I've showed you other ways to find subdomains, including the harvester, but you can find subdomains like this as well. And let's say you only want to find things like, IR, then we can just come in and we can say IR dot. Or maybe you don't want www and you don't want IR. You can take those both out and you start finding more, like partners.tesla. Shop again is coming up. So you can start finding different subdomains this way. Pretty good. A couple other things that we could look for. What about file type? We could say file type like this, and we could search for something like, I don't know, docx. Maybe there's a docx out there. And there's one docx. Okay, it's a survey, probably not useful to us. Maybe we can search for PDFs. With a company as big as Tesla, it's probably going to be a lot to search through, but there are 3,300 of these, almost 3,400 of these. So they've got different items here that we can look through. Maybe Excel, XS, Excel, right? Actually, that's SX. And you can see if there's any Excel and CSV. So what we're doing here, what's the point of me doing this? Well, the point of me doing this is me looking for potentially sensitive files out there or information. You would be surprised with a little bit of hunting on a domain. Now, granted here that Tesla is a big company, big domain, and it's going to be hard to find some of this information, but you would be very surprised with a little bit of prodding, a little bit of Google Foo and narrowing down the type of results that you can get off of a company. I mean, we can find all kinds of interesting stuff. For an example, just the other day, I found a backup page of an entire website just by doing something like this. Entire website, credentials, source code, everything. And just through a little bit of Google Foo. So again, Google is your absolute best friend. Before you ask anybody a question, no matter how complex, I challenge you to Google it first. Make sure you have done your research and then ask somebody. It's just good to get in that habit, and this is what is going to make or break you, I believe, in your career. So please do not ignore the Google machine. It is out there to help you, and it will pay your salary over and over again. So that's it for this video. We've got one more video left in this series or this subset. We're going to talk about a little bit about social media and how we can target that. So I will catch you over in the next video. Okay, so you don't have to follow along in this video. I just kind of want you to start getting the wheels spinning and thinking about other items that we could be looking for when it comes to OSINT. Now, we could look on a website like LinkedIn or like Twitter and find useful information. Now, I was on this website for literally 1 minute. I've logged in, I went to Tesla, and I've already kind of found something, and I want to show you how fast this is. So you come in here and you go to Tesla, the company page here, and I love to click on images. There's always employee photos on images. Now you scroll down a little bit and you can see somebody has recently posted a picture of their internship at Tesla. And what we can do is click on the picture and look for things like badge photos or desk pictures or anything of the sorts. Now, good employees are told to hide their badges from pictures, and you can see they've done a pretty good job. But if you look down here, right down here, it's hard to zoom in, but there is 100% a badge there. Is this a great picture? No, but this is a good example of an easy way to find a badge is utilizing social media. And you can find a lot of stuff very, very, very quickly. So another thing to point out too is that Twitter is a gold mine for these kinds of things. I have found badge pictures, desk pictures, software, all kinds of stuff via Twitter and via LinkedIn. Now, from the non-physical perspective or information gathering perspective for what seems like physical assessments, the other thing to point out is that it's really good to find the people. Like LinkedIn's great. So we can come in here and we can find members, right? And these are all going to say LinkedIn members. I don't have this account is just kind of my peeping account that I just utilize when I want to look and not trigger anything weird when I'm looking at a company. Because if somebody sees me as a person looking at a company, they might say, why is this guy looking at my profile? So We might not get names if you don't have the premium. On some of these, you might see LinkedIn member, but you can also dig some names. Like here's a name, here's a name, here's a name. And you take those names and you remember the formatting from before, right? We had the formatting when we looked at hunter.io and we said, okay, first initial, last name. Well, I might take a first initial, last name here, and I'll add that to my list. Now, we could utilize scrapers out there to look through the employee list and pull down all the names and then transfer those names into first initial, last name. You could write a script to do that with Python if you want to challenge yourself to do that. I guarantee you there are tools out there to do this. But this is the kind of information that we're after. We're after what kind of credentials can we gather? And this loops all back. This is the wheel spinning here, right? You want email addresses. When we're talking network and we're talking what you're going to be doing with these kind of assessments, you want these email addresses. You want anything that's been a part of a breach credential leak, right? And you just want as much information on the employees as you can gather. When you take all these email addresses, and it says 34,000 employees. When you take 34,000 employees, I would almost bet money on it that one of these employees has a password of something like fall 2019 or winter 2019 exclamation, or something like Tesla 1234 exclamation. People are always the weakest point of an organization, and people will be lazy with their passwords unless you absolutely force them to use long passwords. I do not know Tesla's password policy, but I get in almost every external assessment with a weak password like fall 2019 or winter 2019. So I want you to think about these things. We're not going to go too depth into social media, but have that in your wheelhouse as well. We're just trying to utilize as much resources that are out there in order to use them for our advantage. So there's a lot of tools that I've shown you, and I've given you a lot of the basics, and really that's all you need for information gathering. Google is your best friend. Utilize Google to your full advantage. Utilize social media. People post things all the time that they shouldn't be posting, and just dig deep. Information gathering is one of the most important steps along with scanning and enumeration. Keep repeating that to yourself and you'll be very, very successful as a penetration tester. So that is it for this section. I kind of just wanted to give a brief overview of this and then give you some ideas to get your wheels spinning and really think about it. Again, we're harping on breach credentials mainly. So from here, we're going to move into scanning and enumeration. We're going to start doing our hacking, getting into the real weeds of hacking. And I'm very, very excited about that. And you're going to see some of the stuff that you've seen before when it comes to reconnaissance pop back up. So I'm excited to see this play out through the course and how we're going to utilize it. So that's it for this section. I look forward to seeing you in the scanning and enumeration section. So I will catch you over there.
Welcome to the scanning and enumeration section of this course. It is actually now 2021 when we're recording this, and we're doing some light updating on how we go about starting off this lab in this section. So we're going to be using a vulnerable machine called Kioptrix. If you go to Google, you can type in Kioptrix and find it fairly easy. So you go to Kioptrix like this, Kioptrix. And we're going to be using level 1. I'm showing you the source of where it's coming from, but we're actually going to provide this VM just to avoid any sort of confusion. So Kioptrix level 1 here comes from a website called VulnHub. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So you see VulnHub here. VulnHub is a great website and great resource once you kind of get into hacking and learning about this, where you could come to VulnHub and just download a vulnerable machine, run it on VMware or VirtualBox or however you want, and try to attack it. And you can see they have difficulty easy, intermediate. You can come through here and just have fun playing with vulnerable machines. And that's all Kioptrix is. It's a beginner level vulnerable machine that you can download, install, and run. Now, the download and the install, you can see this is from 2010. Some of the stuff was broken, sometimes a little bit difficult to get running in the original lab. So we're just modifying this a bit to make it easier. What we've done on our end is just hosted a file that will work, that will should by default install and run. So if you go to your browser and you just go to tcm-sec.com like this, and you type in /Kioptrix, Kioptrix, pause for a second, make sure you see this, and then you just hit enter. You'll be brought to a Google Drive. Okay, and this Google Drive here should say Kioptrix. You should have an OVF and an OVA file. All you need here is the OVA. And all you'll have to do is just hit download right here, get the download going. I believe this is around 250 megabytes, so it might take a minute. Go ahead, download it, pause, and then come back when you're ready to continue. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to show you how to install this on VMware and on VirtualBox. These are the only two supported methods that we're going to utilize in the course. If you're going and you're using something like VMware Horizon, or you're using a different type of virtualization software, that's fine, but we can't support it if you run into any issues. So we strongly recommend using VMware. If you're using VirtualBox, that's fine as well. But we're going to be doing most of the course in VMware, though it should not matter too much. So here is VMware. I'm going to show you first how to install it here, and then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing in VirtualBox. So all we're going to do is we're going to go to player up here, or we can go to home actually, and we can just say open a virtual machine, and then just go ahead and navigate to the area where you downloaded it. Okay, so here's my file, Kioptrix Level 1. I'm going to say open. I'm going to go ahead and just save this here. So I'm going to say, this is where do you want to save your storage path? I'm saving it here. Call it Kioptrix Level 1, import. The defaults are fine. You might get an error right here. That's okay too. Just hit retry and it should work fine. It's going to take a second to import. While we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and also do the same thing with VirtualBox. So I'm going to get VirtualBox going. And what we'll do here is a similar process. So we'll go to import, and then we'll just select the area for our file. Okay, and mine again is just sitting here on this drive, Kioptrix Level 1.ova. I'll hit next. And then it's going to ask me some questions here. We're just going to hit next on this. We'll go ahead and set these up in a second. So I'm just going to say import, and that'll be fine. All right, so looking at the settings for both of these machines, I'm going to go ahead and drag this over. Here, we can just right click and go to settings. Same thing here, you can right click and go to settings, and we're going to set these up the same. So either way. On 512 megabytes, this is fine. Honestly, if you wanted to kick this down to 256, you could. I would not recommend going any lower than 256, though. Oops, I did not mean to exit that. Though I will say that if you have, I wouldn't go lower than 256. We're just going to be running this in the background. But you don't need to go higher either. So 256 I think is fine. If you want to give a 512, that's fine too, depending on the amount of RAM that you have on your actual machine. So 256 is good. And then here in the network adapter, we're going to switch to NAT. Okay, so make sure you're good there and just hit OK. And that should be it. Same thing here. So if you want to switch the storage, you can, or the amount of RAM allocated, you can. Only big thing here is just going into the network, and you can see that it says NAT network, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, so this box is set up just fine. And then all you have to do on these is just hit play. Okay, all you got to do is power it on. You could just say start here, and I could just hit play here, and both will start. All we're going to do is just let this run. So that's all you want to do at this point. You're just going to let it run. You can see I've got both machines booting. You will come to a login screen, and that's when you know that this is ready. Okay. So when you're at the login screen, it'll say, hey, Kioptrix, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to take it from there, and we're going to figure out how we can get into this machine. Okay. So if you get a screen like this, you can just say do nothing. And just let this keep booting. But other than that, once this runs to a login, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next video. So you see this, once you're at the login screen, you are good to go. All right, and that is it. So I will catch you over in the next video as we walk through how to find this machine, and then we're going to start scanning it and attacking it and hopefully rooting it. So I'll catch you over in the next video. Hello everybody, and welcome to this section on Nmap. I'm actually recording this in 2020, so the video you're going to see here shortly is from 2019. We've had a little bit of issues with the command that I show, which is netdiscover.
on how to find your IP address of the Keyoptrix machine to actually begin scanning this machine. So I'm going to show you a couple of alternatives, and then I'm going to let the video play as it was before, and you'll have several options on how to find your Keyoptrix machine and hopefully find the IP address. So at this Keyoptrix login page, we can cheat just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you a login here, and just go ahead and type John as the login, and I'm going to show you the password before I delete it. The password is going to be 2cows2, just like that. TWOCOWS 2 with the T and a C capitalized. So go ahead and type in John and then 2cows2. And you can see we are now logged in as John at Keyoptrix. Now, this machine is very, very old, so the typical ifconfig or IPA or any of those do not work on this machine. However, we can do a quick ping, for example, to anything we want. We could say 8.8.8.8. It could be an internal IP address. It doesn't even have to be an IP address that resolves. But we could say ping, and as we ping, I'm going to hit Control-C here, you can see that we see ping from 192.168.4.53. That's my IP address. Now, the IP address you're going to see here in the video shortly is going to change. However, as of right now, the IP address I'm seeing for Keyoptrix is 4.53. Now, we also use NetDiscover, but there's actually a cool tool we can utilize as well. Now, if we come into the network, you can see that I have an IP address of 192.168.4.51 for myself. Now, there is a tool built into Kali Linux that is called ARP-Scan, and you could do a syntax of a -L with that. Hit enter, and it's going to pull off an ARP-Scan as well, which is what NetDiscover is doing. What we need to be looking for, and you can see this is kind of my home network, what we need to be looking for is VMware. You can see VMware is sitting here at 192.168.4.53. The only one to be on the lookout for is possibly yourself, which we're at 51. I don't see in this list, it didn't pick us up. So I could see 192.168.4.53. VMware should be the only one that's running, or if you're using VirtualBox or something like that, it should show up here. So kind of identify it either this way, or you can come in and identify it through the Keyoptrix login itself. Of course, you can use NetDiscover as shown in the video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go into the video on scanning with Nmap. Okay, so now we have Keyoptrix up and running. We need to determine where it actually is, and then we can do a little bit of scanning. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up into our applications and open our terminal. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. And we're going to run a tool called NetDiscover. So before we can do that, we need to type in ifconfig and identify your IP address. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this first 3 octets here. And we're going to run NetDiscover. So NetDiscover is going to look like this. We're going to say NetDiscover. We're going to do a -R for range. We're going to paste in this and do a .0/24. So what are we doing? We are going to be using ARP to detect all the machines on the network. So you should be familiar with ARP from the Linux lessons and from the networking lessons. So we're going to attempt to use ARP to address anything on the network, and we're sweeping the entire subnet of /24. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And in a second here, our machine should start popping up, and it does. So remember, our host was at 139. This host here at 134 is likely our culprit. So you should only have 2 machines in network because we're only running 2. You can ignore .1, .2, and .254. We are only focusing on the one that looks similar to ours, which is 192.168.57.134. So now we know our machine address. We can start attacking it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-C, which is going to kill this session here. And I'm going to hit Control-L to clear my screen. All right, so I'm going to open up a notepad and we'll just store this away for a rainy day. We need to first talk about what we're going to be doing here. So remember before when we ran our TCP three-way handshake, we had something like SYN, SYN-ACK, and ACK, right? And we can just say SYN-ACK kind of like this to combine it. So we've got 3 parts. We've got the part where we reach out to a port and we say, hey port, are you open? And the port says, yeah, I'm open. Let's go ahead and make that connection. And then we go ahead and connect to it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a tool called Nmap. And Nmap stands for Network Mapper. Now, what Network Mapper is going to go out and do is it's going to scan for open ports and services. Now, this scanning is going to take place, and it's going to identify these open ports with something similar to this three-way handshake. So we're just going to modify it a little bit. Now, what the process that we're doing is called stealth scanning, and it used to be written out like this. Now it's just done by default, and we'll get to the switches here in a second. Don't worry about that. We're going to be running stealth scanning. And now this stealth scanning used to be stealthy, right? That's why they called it stealth scanning, because it used to be undetectable. Nowadays, very detectable. If you run Nmap in a network that has good security, you're going to get picked up. Although, being a pen tester, I would say Nmap probably doesn't get picked up in 80% of the assessments that I run. So don't expect clients to be running good security, but just know that even though it says stealth, it's not stealthy at all. So the stealth scanning, why was it stealthy? Why was it called this? Well, if we go back to the three-way handshake, what the stealth scan does is it does the SYN. It says, hey, I want to connect to you. And the open port, if it's open, will say, yeah, I want to make that connection back with you, friend. And what's going to happen is we're just going to say, you know what? I'm just kidding. I'm going to send over this reset flag. So this RST. Why? Well, that means we don't actually establish a connection. So like when you go out to a website and you go to Google and Google loads, well, guess what? You establish that connection. You establish that three-way handshake. What we're doing is we're going out and we're saying, hey, I want to establish connection. The port reveals to us that, yes, I am open for connection. And then we're going to say, just kidding, let's not make that connection. Because we never established that connection, then it was technically stealthy. So that's what we're going out and we're doing. We're never making connections to these ports, but this is how we're identifying them as open. So we're going to use a tool, and we're going to use a tool like this. We're going to say Nmap, and we're going to say something along the lines of -T4 -P -A. Now, you have no idea what this means, and I don't expect you to, but I'm going to walk you through these. And what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, Nmap, I have a choice in speed, and that choice in speed can be between a 1 and a 5. 1's really slow, and 5's really fast. Now, the default for me has always been 4. Now, I'm teaching you my preference. It's always been 4, okay? And we utilize this, and I think 5's okay, but 5's kind of fast. Maybe you're going to miss something. Maybe it gets caught. The slower, the better in terms of detection, but in the instance that we're going to be running it through this course, we're going to use 4. Anytime you do like a VulnHub or something like a Hack the Box, which you're going to see here in a few videos, you're going to run T4 just because you're not worried about this detection, you're not worried about anything. So T4 is a speed purpose. Now, -P-. Well, this stands for I want to scan all ports. Okay, we could say something like -P, or we could just have -P left off completely. Now, if we leave off -P completely, it's going to scan what are known as the top 1,000 ports. The top 1,000 ports are your most common ports. So think of like port 80, port 443, 139, 445. All the ports that we covered in the networking section going to show up again here. But there are 65,535 ports out there. We want to scan every single one of those, because what if, for example, there is a service running on port 47,700? Well, that's not a common top 1,000 port. If we don't scan all ports, then we're going to miss that port. And that could be something incredibly valuable to us, right? So I always scan like this, -P-. You can also do things like scan specific ports. You could say like 443, or say you wanted to scan just for web servers. You could do 8443, something like that. Or you can mix in, say you want to scan for DNS as well. You can add in 53, etc. You can scan for specifics, and we're going to get into that in a little bit of a later video on why we might do it this way. But for now, for the beginner lesson, -P-. We're going to scan everything. And lastly, we've got this -A in here. So -A stands for everything. I want to scan all of it. I want you to tell me the version information, the operating system information, anything you can tell me, fingerprinting, etc. Now, this may all be confusing. It's going to make a lot more sense when you see a scan. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new tab. And what I want you to do, let's go ahead and I'm going to blow this up for us. And what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and start running the scan while we wait. So go ahead and copy this here. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put in our IP address, and that's how it knows what to scan. We're just going to hit enter on that. And now we're scanning. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and I want to run mmap again with the -- help. And I want to talk through some of these settings in here so that you understand fully what we're doing. Now, -- help is always great, as I said before. Man pages are good as well. But let's talk about some things here. So we've got this host discovery section, which we're really not going to use in this course, but this is good for, say, a -n. Say you want to do a ping sweep of the network. Well, you can do a ping scan, right? Where you just sweep an entire subnet, a /24, for example, and see what's up very quick. A -pn, maybe the host isn't acting like it's online, but you know it's there for sure. You can say -pn, and you can say, hey, I want to leave all the hosts or treat all the hosts as if they're online, even if they're not responding to my ping request or anything. So make yourself familiar with this kind of stuff. This is interesting, and we'll cover a lot of this as we go in the course, but just for the first walkthrough while we're scanning, I think this is super important. Now, scan techniques. This -ss, this comes back into play. TCP SYN is what it's called, but it's also known as the stealth scan. There's all these other types of scans. You're not going to need them. There's only maybe one scan out of all these that may be useful, but you're not going to need them through this course, and you'll probably never use anything but the SS and the SU 99% of the time. So for the scope of this course, that's what we're going to focus on. Now, the SS, we talked about connection-oriented protocols. We talked about TCP. Well, guess what? There's also UDP, and there's 65,535 ports over there as well that we have to scan. Now, UDP is a connection-less protocol. So what we're going to do when we scan it, let's go back to this scan. What we're going to do when we scan it is we're going to actually do that SU in here, and I'll copy this syntax and just move it over so it looks a little cleaner. We're going to say something like, we can put it anywhere we want. The order doesn't matter, but we can say something like -SU to scan for UDP. And the one little change that I make here, two changes actually. I take off the -A and I do a -P-. Why do I do a -P, I should say. Why do I do this? I do this because UDP takes forever to scan, absolutely forever to scan. Because it is a connectionless protocol, it does not have that instant response time. So when we scan UDP, typically we scan the top 1,000. That is my recommendation to you, or else you will be sitting here waiting for hours upon hours for a scan to finish. See, now our scan over here is already finished. If I were to run this UDP with the same thing, it will take forever. Going back into this before we get into the scan. You can see here that we can specify -P of port. That's going to be very common for us, but here's where I really want to get into. We're doing a -SV, a -SC, a -O here, all with the -A, okay? So we're probing open ports for service information. We could say -SV, and we could say -SC, or we could pick these, one or the other, or a mixture of some of these. But we can also do script scanning, which we'll get into script scanning here in a little bit as well. But we can do OS detection, where it goes out and it tries to define an operating system, and you're going to see all this with our scan. But when we use -A, it does it all for us. So why not use -A? So you can see it does OS detection, version detection, script scanning, and traceroute. Now, there's one caveat to -A, and we're going to talk about this in another video in a thought process. It is much faster to remove the -A and scan a -P-. Typically, that'll come back much, much, much faster. Then what you can do is you can define the open ports. So say there's port 22, port 80. Okay, just go through this. You can specify those ports specifically. You could say -P like we did in the example earlier with 80 and 443, and then do a -A on those. Now that will just scan only these specific ports with all. Instead of going out to every single port and attempting to do all on every single port, it's just a little bit faster. Now, if your wheels are spinning and you're thinking about it, maybe even you can script this, right? You can script something to say, hey, Nmap, I want to take these ports from a basic scan, anything that you pull back, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run a new scan on it with the -A, only specifying the ports that we found. That gets your wheels spinning. This is where scripting becomes important. If you want an improvement on speed, for me personally, I've never ever done that. I don't think, for me personally, that it's made much of a difference. I just let my scans run as they run, and I work on other things while scans are running. There's plenty of time to do other things while you're doing your scanning. So, and typically, another thing to note is typically we're doing scanning when we're doing our OSINT as well. So if we start up a client assessment, one of the first things I'm going to do is probably kick off a NESA scan or an Nmap scan. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to